Welcome to the Raise podcast. I'm Carol Barwick. We're here to raise your confidence and inspire your creativity. Each episode, we will have a different guest who will be discussing our Raise word. The Raise word is a word that will encourage you or empower you and at times inspire you to explore the word a little more for yourself. Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Raise podcast. I'm Carol Barwick. Usually at the start of our show, I would be about to introduce a guest. However, today I'm going to be introducing you to a whole host of guests, as this is our review episode. I have to say that the review episode is one of my favourite episodes of each season because it gives you a real taste of all the different guests. I see it a little bit like a tasting menu. You can try out lots of little bits of each of the guests and then see which ones you know that you need to listen to in greater detail. I do hope, however, that each of these snippets raises your confidence and inspires your creativity, so that even if this is the only episode that you listen to all year, you feel like you've really got something from it. So, without more ado, let's get into all that season 3 had to offer us. Bon appetit! Naturally, I wanted to start season 3 with a real corker of a guest, and Vanessa Ferrero did not disappoint. Vanessa is a singer-songwriter and she's currently living in Colombia in a house that she has built by herself with just one other person. You may have seen a few weeks ago that Ben Fogle interviewed her on the Channel 5 Lives in the Wild programme, and he was as moved as everybody else by her story. This is Vanessa telling us a little bit about how it feels to have Ben Fogle living in your house. I mean, that just is an adventure, isn't it? That's a huge adventure. And you've had someone visit you recently who will be sharing the adventure with us at some point. Tell us a little bit about your English visitor that came, was it last week, to do some filming with you?
So this is thanks to Sarah Mumford, who might be listening. She is an amazing friend, the most supportive person in the world. And she would always say, there's a TV show called New Lives in the Wild, Ben Fogle's New Lives in the Wild. You should get in touch. She said it various times, because that's what I usually need, like various times. Got in touch with the team and they're like, yeah, great. Well, come on, a couple of months, we'll be there. And I'm like, oh my God, is that really happening? And I didn't believe it until Ben Fogle himself was in the village and I went to pick him up on my motorbike, brought him here. We gave Sarah a ring on the phone. Hey, Sarah, look, he's here. And we did a show, 2 weeks. They filmed here. Ben stayed, helped water the plants and just got to share the land here. And they were really happy. I just couldn't believe it. I'm there on my little terrace that I built on my napkin, designed on a napkin. And I'm watching these 3 trucks of cameras leave my little mountain trail road. And I'm just looking at like, life is just so good. I know it isn't, there's difficult times, there'll be difficult times, but right now I'm sat on my terrace watching the sunset with these 3 trucks full of like fancy cameras and Ben Fogle leaving after a first day of filming. And there's me, little Vanessa, with little Ginger, the wolf here. I'm enjoying the taste of life so much right now. I've had a difficult time recently. My dog had a fatal disease and she's on death's door for a couple of weeks, and just to try and balance the story out, so it's not always up. I feel bad for always saying that it's wonderful, because just to balance it out, there's hard stuff, and families, friends, and all of that. But in that moment of when they were here was one of the highest, like most amazing times. Everything flowed. They were just like, this is just magical. And they told me that it was one of the most fluid shoots they've ever had. They've never had a shoot where everything's just flowed so well. And, there was tears and joy and happiness and everything in these 2 weeks. So that's going to go out. I have no idea. A few months, takes 2 months to edit. Yeah. And it'll go out. So I'm like, God, they found me. So I could still keep having my city connections and city life whilst I'm in the middle of absolutely nothing.
It is such a privilege to know Vanessa Ferrero and to see some of the adventures that she's been on. One lady who listened to the podcast episode actually found it life-changing. It was a lady that I was in hospital with a few years ago, and we now call each other adventure buddies as a result of the episode, which I think is rather nice. One of the perks of being a podcast host is that you get to interview lots of people that you know, and known was the next word that we looked at. I chose to speak to a friend that I went to school with, Fran, who is also a very successful singer-songwriter. Fran and I talked about the difference between knowing and knowledge.
I think being known is the experience, is knowing something is when you haven't just kind of absorbed the information, you've had the experience to use the information. You've used the information. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Then you're getting to the point where you're able to, it's just, you've got a much more kind of, you've got a stronger, what's the word? You're in a stronger position to be able to express what you want to say. It's a bit like, I did French in high school, did it to A-levels, but I actually nearly failed. Even though I didn't fail, but I got like an E or something, which for me was devastating because I was quite a good student. But I had the knowledge, I just couldn't put all the words together. It was only when I went to France and got the experience of living with the people that I actually was able to take this knowledge and make it into something. And that for me is actually knowing, that's what the difference between knowing and knowledge is.
Experience is so important when it comes to the difference between really knowing something and that head knowledge. Talking about experience, our next guest was my very first experience into podcasting. It was Corinna Perkins, and she was my very first podcast guest back in the day when we first started the Raise podcast. This time, Corinna and I talked about the word shine, and we looked at why she chose the song True Colours to be the main theme of her CIC.
Lots of reasons, really. I won't bore you, but the first one was I actually woke up in the middle of the night with the song True Colours in my head. You know, the Cyndi Lauper one.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was really going through a very, very dark time personally. And I remember going downstairs and putting the song on to have a listen to. And the words were, I see your true colours shining through. I see your true colours, that's why I love you. And there's a lot in that song that I just think is great. But that particular 2 lines, it was like, I actually felt God say, I'm not done with you yet. I was at a point where I felt like, what do I do? Where do I go? What's my next I don't know what to do with my life, God. And I remember very clearly, it's like, I see what's ahead of you. I see the colours in you. I see all the vibrance and all the kind of, at the prison, like I see all that in you. You might not see it right now, but I can see it. And that's where it came from. I actually went, that's it. If I do a business in the future, that's exactly what I'm calling it, because, God sees that in me, but he also sees that in other people. And I think that was the most powerful. Like, God always speaks to me through song, always. And it's always random songs. It's never, it's always something that comes from nowhere. And I'm like, hang on, where's that come from? Why is that? And I always get a very quick interpretation of, this is what it's about. And I love that about God. I love that, that's my connection with him. It's like, that's our little thing. That if there's a song that comes into my mind, I'm always like, right, what's that about God? Why have I got that song in my head?
Never underestimate the power of lyrics. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll know how important I think creativity is, and not just creativity, but particularly the power of music. Our next guests, Howard and Gemma Francis, talked about the word rise, and we talked all about the rise in their choir, the Big Sing. In a minute, we're going to share some exciting news that they had with you. But firstly, we're going to look at what happens when you're given a piano, but you're not allowed to use it.
For me, it was always music. It was always music. From I can remember, there's nothing that I wanted to do more than music. And my father saw that in me as well. And he went and bought me a piano. which he locked up in the front room because back in the day, yes, in our
that sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah, no, because in our culture, the front room the lounge was somewhere you didn't go.
Okay.
You only took visitors there.
Okay.
Who came to the house. So
right.
He put the piano in there. I know, it's strange, isn't it? So he put the piano in there, and I couldn't touch that piano for ages. But like I said, music was always something in me. I never wanted to do anything else. And it all stemmed from London Community Gospel Choir as well, because I was in that when it first started. But leading up to that, I was always playing in church. I had little jobs and stuff like that. Like before, I was doing engineering, actually, diesel engineering.
Cool.
So, because I was really good with my hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. I did an apprenticeship and that was going fine. But to be honest, music, once that took hold of me, that was always the case. That was always in my soul, in my heart.
Yeah.
And went for it. The doors opened, basically. Yeah.
Can you just take me back though, Howard? So the piano was locked in the room. How, this is important. And I've got it's quite exciting. So the piano was locked in the room. How long was it until you were allowed to play it?
Oh gosh, you're talking about from the time my dad got the piano, a good 6 months or so.
Okay.
And we couldn't go into that room. We just could not go into that room. And it's just a culture thing. It's a culture thing.
Yeah.
How
did that feel? So you knew that there was something there that was about to like set your life on fire, but you couldn't touch
my gosh. Yeah, and I knew he bought it for me. But he made me wait.
Wow.
So when he used to go out, I should try the door to see if he might have, forgotten to lock it.
Contraband piano playing.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it was always locked. He knew what he was doing. So my hunger was like going through the roof, for it, But eventually he opened the door and I went in and I just had a great time in that front room.
I don't know about you, but I think that really exercised Howard's patience and his passion for wanting to play the piano. And if you know anything about Howard and Gemma Francis, you will know just how passionate they are about music. This journey took on a strange turn, of course, in 2020 when COVID hit. And for Gemma and Howard, they watched the big sing potentially become very small. Everything went online, and as you hear in the main body of the podcast, things were very different. However, it seemed that God had a big plan. And it came in the form of Britain's Got Talent. Let's listen to Gemma talking about how exciting that journey was for them all.
We got to November and I felt like God restored our numbers, but then not only did he restore us our numbers, but then he gave us an amazing opportunity to rise in our and just be able to have more exposure. So we got a call from Britain's Got Talent.
Wow.
And they said, "Oh, do you want to come on the show?" And we'd only literally just got our numbers back at this point. And I said to Howard, this would be an amazing opportunity just to give us an amazing platform. Yeah. If we got on TV, just think how many people would see us. So we applied, didn't we? And we went through the journey of Britain's Got Talent. And I feel like God gave us that amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
It was like he was saying, look, guys, you've hung on to this promise that I've given you. And now here's your reward. Do you know what I mean? This is. We went on Britain's Got Talent. It was aired a couple of weekends ago and 5.5 million people saw us on the show, tuned in to watch the show. Millions of people have seen us on social media. YouTube has got nearly 500,000 views. Wow. I mean, what bigger platform could we have been given to show the big thing and what we do? It's been an absolute miracle and God has turned it around big time.
Often on the Raise podcast, we talk about words that are very familiar, but no word is as familiar as the word self. And we talked to James Pearson all about it. One of the questions we always ask at the top of the podcast is, what does the word mean to you? So here's what the word self means to James.
Right. It's probably one of the most significant words I think I can think of when I think of life and humanity. But are you familiar with the Rouge test?
I don't think so. Tell us all.
Okay, so life starts obviously when we're born, and the Rouge test was invented to determine a point in time when we become aware of ourselves as a separate organism. And basically the idea is that we paint a small red dot on a child's head, and the point at which the child looks in the mirror and realizes that the dot is on their head and not a picture on the wall is the moment that they become self-aware.
Wow.
So that's where self begins. But I think throughout certainly the last few years of my life, I've been channeling all my energy into trying to work out what it means to have a self and how to define that self. And really the conclusion is that the self is not just a construct of who you are, but it's a construct of who you are with other people.
Yeah.
And then I read something in a book, and I forget which one, and it blew my mind. And that was the fact that we believe that we are individuals, and yet our lives begin almost symbiotic. We begin joined to another person. So the self is something that comes completely sort of alien to the way in which we are created and birthed into the world. It's an unusual thing.
I wonder what the word self means to you. Another word that seems to be in the arena all the time is, of course, the word music. And I spoke to the brilliant Daniele de Lissandri from Music Box Project in Pudsey about the word music. Now, I'm not going to give you a very big clip because actually Dan's podcast episode is the most listened to episode from season 3. So I want you to go and listen to it yourself. However, I am going to ask Dan to tell us the story of what happened when he found something interesting in the boot of a car.
The funny story, actually, how I got my first set of DJ decks. One of my cousins who lives in Plymouth owns a scrapyard, car scrapyard, and one day he opened a boot of a scrap car and found it was a brass instrument in there. He had no idea what it was. Turned out it was a Stradivarius flugelhorn.
Wow.
Which was probably worth brand new, probably about, I don't know, easily £1,000. So he knew that I played the trumpet, and he was like, Daniele, would you like this instrument? I don't know what to do with it. You can have it. So I got this instrument, and I didn't really play it. I was it was when I started sort of stopping playing musical instruments. So I sold it to a friend of mine for about £800, and I bought my first set of decks with that. So that was how it kind of began, and I literally bought 2 records and 2 dance music records, and then taught myself to beat match with those 2 records for about 2 weeks, going back and forth with 2 records, and then I started buying more and more records, and then got into it a bit more.
What I really like about Dan is the way that he can collaborate with so many people. And the word collaborate was the word that we talked about with our next guest, Rhiannon Mary Helgason. We talked about what you need for a good collaborative relationship, how it can go wrong, and what happens when it goes right. What else would you say you need in order to have like a good collaborative experience?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you actually mentioned about the wisdom piece, because if the wisdom isn't there, it can be quite disastrous. I've been in relationships where there wasn't any wisdom. It was just, it looked shiny, it looked good, and I just went for it, and then reaped the benefits of that. And so that wisdom piece is like, okay, is this wise? Just taking that time to evaluate the situation, evaluate the person.
There's a lot to it, isn't there, Rhiannon? There's a lot to collaboration in order to make it something that really works. I'm thinking about a different type of collaboration and the whole world of social media influencers. And I wonder how that works for people, because you were talking about kind of seeing shiny things. And I think that can often happen. You see somebody that you maybe want to endorse your product, and you kind of say, right, okay, I'm going to get in touch with them. And there can be a real disappointment, even if they share it with their millions and millions of followers, in that actually they don't really care about your product at all. And I think there's some kind of conversation around how important is your product to the person that you're collaborating with. Do you think that's important?
Definitely. If you are interested in the product, if you know that it's going to be beneficial to other people, you're going to promote that in a different way than you would if it's something that you're not even going to use, if you don't understand the product. And so I think that plays a huge part in it, that the hearts and minds of the people that you collaborate with have to be in agreement. Because I don't think it would be as impactful if those two were out of alignment. Yeah.
Collaboration can be so rewarding. But have you ever thought about how much courage it takes to collaborate with somebody else? In our next episode, we talked to creative mentor Paula Burns about the word courage. One of the things I love about Paula's group is we often look at advertising. And in this clip, we talk about the power of advertising and just how much courage it takes to really show yourself for what you are. I think the whole world of advertising and branding is fascinating, because it's about putting you out there, isn't it? And the number of different ways that we can put ourselves out there. Now, obviously, I'm not a bottle of tomato ketchup, neither am I a pair of trainers, but somebody has gone through all the process of creating the bottle of ketchup, deciding it's in a glass bottle rather than a plastic bottle, and that it's going to be, a Heinz product, and there's so much behind it. Yeah. And that's no different for us.
No, not at all. And I think that gets missed by business owners, especially female small business owners. They forget that it's the detail. Yeah. Don't forget the detail of what it is that you offer. Even if you think it's something really small, it's something, and it's, if it's something quirky about you, is it something quirky about what you offer? How can you incorporate that in your business? It's not about, I think a lot of the times we think, well, how can we make ourselves smaller? And it's not about making yourself smaller. It's about making yourself bigger.
Yeah. But that's definitely where the courage comes in, isn't it, Paula? Because as I said earlier, it's about looking at the myriad of people out there doing the same thing as you and saying, no, I know I can do this differently. Maybe better, but sometimes that doesn't matter so much, but differently, I can reach a different market. Yeah. But everybody else seems to be doing it the same and it's working for them. So why should what
they
I do?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the courage comes in. When it comes to courage and confidence, you would think somebody like our next guest, Emma Lightbown, who's a model and a Sky presenter and a stylist, would have bags of confidence. However, we really talked to Emma about the word feel and whether it's important to feel like you're confident or not. The whole of this podcast was really, really inspiring to do. However, this particular part is where we talked about what happens when you give a particular set of people the confidence to really feel like they can do anything. Have a listen.
One of the my favourite things I've done is volunteering for an incredible charity that's called Suited and Booted. And they're based in London, and they provide interview clothing to men who are long-term unemployed, have mental health problems, who have maybe been released from prison, for whatever reason, are not in the world of work and aren't able to provide suitable clothing for themselves to go to job interviews. So they come and have an appointment and we style them up. The charity are donated loads and loads of clothes and suiting from brands, from individuals. And so they come, we have a lovely little chat with them, and then we style them up in a suit. And it's incredibly rewarding because this is a real thing about feel. So a lot of these people come in feeling very unconfident. They don't rate their chances of getting this job. They don't think they're going to get to work. And that's all that they want to do. They want to build a better life for themselves and for their families. And so they come into the charity. We get them suited and booted, as the name suggests. And that moment when you show them the mirror and they look in the mirror at themselves, you feel what they feel. Wow. And some of them are so overwhelmed. There's been gentlemen who like had tears in their eyes. There's people who are just so overwhelmed in what they look like, because for many of them, it's the first time they've ever worn a suit. They've never had a suit on before. So to suddenly be in this suit, they feel incredible. And the confidence level that this brings them is unbelievable. And so I know that people feel quite often that fashion is very fickle and it's a very superficial thing. But honestly, this is a real root of confidence and really can change how you feel about yourself and how you project yourself to the world.
I wonder what your favourite outfit is and how it makes you feel. One of the mission statements in Raise is everyone can teach, everyone can learn. And goodness me, didn't I learn a lot from our next podcast guest, 8-year-old Aurora Harris. Aurora is on TV and does advertising, and she's also on the stage. And I learned so much from her when we talked about the word try. In this clip, Aurora talks about wanting to do a front walkover and how encouragement can come in all kinds of different ways. You were saying earlier on about your front walkover, and you were saying that your little brother helped you. And I have a little phrase, which is, don't say I can't, say I can with help. And I think that's one of the things that you did with your front walkover, didn't you? You didn't just say, right, I'm not doing it. You said, okay, I need some help. I'm going to go on. What did you do? You went on YouTube?
And we watched 2 girls do it. I watched them do it in slow motion as well, so I could see how they did it. And then I tried and I didn't get it, and I tried, didn't get it. Then my brother helped. He gave me some advice how fast to run, and then I did it, and then I did my front walkover, and my mum saw, so she was videoing me. She saw on the video that that I was like cheering really, really like loud when I did it.
Brilliant. So is your brother a Great British gymnastic champion?
No. He's only
so
4.
Why do you think he wanted to help you do a front walkover?
Because I'm his sister and he loves me the most out of our family.
Isn't that a lovely, lovely reason to want someone to try? Isn't that brilliant? Because I think I'm right in thinking that your brother's is younger than you as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 4.
And yet he really wanted you to do well. I'm assuming that you're not all trying to do front walkovers now, but we've all got things to learn, haven't we? And yes, corny segue, our next podcast guest talked about the word learn. Our guest was Lindsey Fekete, and she talked about what it was like to realise for the first time that she was actually creative.
I mean, one of the reasons that I loved your podcast and your page and things was about the creative aspect, because I would never have said I was naturally creative when I was teaching. Again, like you, I can't draw. I would say I can't draw. I don't choose creative things like that I thought would typically, I'm doing my finger quotes, things like typically creative, the arts and music and those things are never things that I naturally gravitated to or found easy. But I think I've learned that I am very creative now that I have the rein to do what I want to do, really, because I'm creating my own resources for parents, I'm creating my own resources for children to use at home, and that was a nice thing to learn. Actually,
that's really good. Again, it's that box, isn't it? It's that kind of, well, this is the creative box. Now I'm drawing a box on my fingers. This is the creative box and only these people can fit in it. Whereas the whole idea of a creative box is there is no box at all. And or there is a box if you want a box, but it doesn't have to be a cardboard box, or it could be whatever box you want. And everybody belongs there in some way or other. And I think the idea of like conflict resolution and then creating your own resources and that kind of thing is definitely creative. One of the things I found hardest as a teacher, I absolutely hated people saying to me, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Because I used to say to them, now, I might not need to reinvent the wheel. I really want to. Please let me reinvent the wheel, because this child here needs it in this way and this child here needs it in this way. And if I simply give them a wheel that everybody else notices and recognizes, they're never going to be able to, ride a bike, for want of a very bad analogy. Details about what Lindsey does and all of our guests are on the show notes. So do go back over every guest when you listen and have a look at the show notes too, because there's lots and lots more information that you can find out. Now, we talked about learning, but what happens when you're asked to make a biscuit chandelier on television? I was so proud to be able to interview Karen Wright from the Bake Off on our episode 12 of season 3. And we talked about the word ask. Because when you're asked to do a biscuit chandelier on TV, the first thing you do is ask for help. Here's Karen to tell us all about it.
I have tried at times to battle my way through it and not ask for help until I felt really, really, really in need. But when I have asked for help, I've discovered actually that people are very happy to give it, and they feel part of certainly with the Bake Off journey, which was a bit of a secret. So if you like, when I knew that I was on the Bake Off, they send you the briefs so that you practice what you're going to do, or you decide how you're going to fit the brief, should I say. So they tell you what it's going to be. So let me take you an example, one of the really, really difficult ones. They were all difficult, of course. So every Friday we received an email. Once we'd been picked to go on the show, we got a brief every week, and we had to decide. In week 5, they said, this is going to be a biscuit chandelier, a huge biscuit chandelier. It's going to hang from a ceiling, and it's going to be this long and this heavy, and it's got to wow, and it's got to have construction elements. And I was getting beyond I was looking at this email and thinking, I don't even understand this.
You mean you've never made a biscuit chandelier?
No, Karen? I mean, it's not.
Where have you been? Like, I'm making them every week.
all the time. I'm sure I missed a trick on that, but no, not me. And of course, I'd already done 4 showstoppers in the lead up, and so I was starting to get really bogged down in a way, and it's an anxious time. So I was really at my wits' end. And that's the key time when I really, really asked the people in my family, so that was my husband and my 2 daughters, I said, I don't know, I don't understand. In fact, this is now going so far over my head, I can't even read the words properly. So that was an example of when all of us gave our different skills and interpretations and help. So, my husband, he's of an engineering background, so he sort of understood when this talks about structural support, and he had some good ideas how to build that in and how it would stand up, so that was that. So off we went to garden centres looking for chicken wire and various things that he'd got in thought, ribbons and lots of stuff. And my these 2 wonderful daughters, both very different. One's so creative that she makes the costumes, or it's on the team for the masked singer and masked dancer. That's she was making a bear's foot.
Right,
yesterday.
Next podcast episode. Right, I'm writing that down.
So she does that. So she's so creative. So she's very artistic.
Okay.
Now my other daughter, she's got many degrees. She's a doctor of philosophy. She's very, very. So between us, we all have these different things to give to the project. And of course, as soon as I could understand where we were going with it, I felt immediately empowered and better to continue with that. And I did it. It wasn't my best bake, but it did hang and it did fit the brief. And that was because I asked for that help. If I hadn't done, I think I would have just collapsed under the stress of it by then. So loads in the bake-off. But then after the bake-off, of course, as I've already said, I've moved on to pastures new, just culminating recently with I've got a new book. It published it myself, which is this time last year. I had no idea that I was going to do that, and that has required me to ask a great deal. And I've been asking this morning before we did the recording of the podcast. I've been asking for help again, and now I'm used to it, and it's great, and we feel like a team.
I'm so glad that Karen asked all those questions. And of course, some of those questions then led her into writing a book. Details of the book and lots of other resources from our guests are in the show notes. We talked a lot about being able to do things, but what happens if you live in a world of can't? In our next episode, we spoke to Joanne Jones about the word can. And in this clip, we talk about what happens when you start looking at all the things you can do. We then also lead into a poem that I wrote. Those of you that listen to the Raise podcast will know that I write a poem on the spot for each and every guest, but this guest particularly inspired me with this poem, and I hope it inspires you too.
Children through a lens of can't, and they're making those comparisons, what the neighbour's child did at that age, what their sibling did at that age, what their nephew did, and so all the time all they can see is that list of can'ts. And in my work we switch that, we change the lens, we start to look for what the child can do, and when you start to just change what you're looking for, it's like you see what you look for, and when you start to look at what they can do, things start to lift, they feel lighter, and you see that progress in everyday little moments, because you're like, well, actually they can do this, and actually I didn't realize they were doing that because I was so busy focusing on them not being able to do this. And so I think that there's such empowerment in that moment of switch, and it's one of the things that I love the most in the work that I do, is when the parents switch to seeing those can-dos and be going, oh my gosh, Joanne, I didn't even realise that there was all of this that was so positive.
Jo, we now come to the part of the episode where I create a poem. And I'm feeling incredibly inspired, and yet there's a little voice in the back of my mind that's saying, you still can't really, you can't really do this. So I will just take a few seconds. I can't fly, but I can try. I can look at those things around me and I can question why. And I can go to people who see the things I can. And I can do so many things. And I am more than. And what right do I have to tell others that they can't and they shouldn't and they couldn't and they won't and they shan't? Because we are human beings and we are all of value. So don't look at what you can't do. Look at what you can do. That was all right, wasn't it?
I love that. That was amazing.
Oh,
well
see.
Done.
It's so important to look at the things that we can do. Often on the podcast, we try and follow particular days that are happening throughout the year. And one of those days that are becoming more and more important is Menopause Awareness Day. For our next guest, I spoke to Bukky Ayoade. Bukky is one of the leading specialists in menopause in the NHS. And I talked to her a little bit about what that role really looked like and how it helped people. Again, this is one of the episodes that I would say go and listen to all the way through. Whether you're a man or a lady, menopause affects us all. Over to Bukky.
I work at the NHS. I'm a menopause lead within our workforce training and education directorates, and that role involves creating menopause interventions for our NHS workforce. The NHS is the largest workforce in Europe. It's got 1.3 million people, and about 1 in 4, 1 in 3 of those people are in the age bracket that fall into the menopause age bracket. That's 45 to 55.
Okay.
And so that as an organization, they recognize that we could be vulnerable, so we need to keep those women in work, and we need to create resources that support them. So some of the things that we've done, obviously because it's menopause month as well as menopause day, is we had a webinar to our whole entire directorate around menopause, which that went down well. That was last week. I also have some of our networks, they're planning meetings, and they've invited me along to speak at those meetings. One of my colleagues in Southwest London, he's a man who's really he looks after the health and well-being function in Southwest London, and he's really engaged in the menopause space, and we need male allies. So he's organizing an event at the end of the month. I'll be supporting him there as well.
Excellent.
I also have a few other speaking gigs externally as well. So I was at one last week where it's called WIMBIZ Nigeria. It's a Women in Business and Public Life. It's a renowned women's organization from Nigerian, but they launched in London, and so I spoke at that platform on that platform, and I have another one coming up next week on the 19th. That's a large Nigerian bank, and they're supporting their workforce, and it's called W Community, so they have a women's community. So with all of these things, obviously I'm speaking, so I'm preparing what I'm going to say. I'm preparing, and it's, each thing is individual and different, so you have to tailor what you're saying. But at the end of the day, it's talking about menopause resources, e-learning, where people can go to find what they need, etc., etc.
As I said just at the beginning of that intro, menopause really does affect us all. Whatever age you are, you will know somebody who's going through it. So please do look at the show notes, find out any information that you can. One of the things that you need when you're looking at something like the menopause is empathy. And our next guest, Sam Rawlings, was fantastic when we talked about this word. Sam is a children's counsellor, but what we talked about was when I wrote her a business jingle. We're going to talk to Sam about how that came about, and then we're going to listen to the jingle itself. Enjoy.
So that were me being doing my solo.
Yeah.
So coming to now, when I saw your you were doing the business jingles, I was drawn, I don't even know what was going on in my head. I was like music, singing, drawn. And then when you said and I already had in my head that I wanted to sing it, but I almost waited until you said, Carol, so would you like to sing? I'm like, yes, of course I would.
Yeah.
And the excitement, but the nerves, I must have recorded it about 20 times. I am not enough. Wait a minute. I had to go back, and in the end, I was just stop, you are enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what it sounds like, squeaky voice, whatever, do it. And I did, and I was so grateful that I was able to do that. And then it's kind of developed from there. So like you said, I invited you on as a guest. I didn't say that. So my series is called Let's Talk About Creativity, and you were my first guest, and I knew you had to be my first guest because you planted that tree for me. You gave me that choice and that love and that empathy to actually say that, Sam, you can do this, and this is the starting point.
You're gonna make me cry. I have a song in my heart. Let me help you sing it. I have a message to share with the world. Let me help you bring it. Let's bring it to life. 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 Okay, time for another tenuous link. We've just been talking about the word jingle, and so it was fitting that our next guest was known as Mrs. Christmas and Santa's favourite storyteller. Kirsty-Louise Garbutt talked to us all about the word believe. Kirsty has written lots of wonderful books about Santa and his missing buttons. But in this little clip, I wanted to find out about what storytelling meant to some of the children that she meets. I love this little story of this boy. Have a listen and enjoy. Children, unpack for us a little bit about what a story session is like when Mrs. Claus appears. Is it Mrs. Claus?
Yeah, it's like Santa. I've got many names.
Okay,
so Santa's favourite storyteller is one. Mrs. Claus is another.
Yeah.
Mrs. Christmas is another.
Yeah.
The Christmas lady, the button lady. There are many variants, and I'm loving the fact that nobody's labelled me with just one thing yet. There is so many of them, which
and long
is
may that
adorable.
continue. Yeah,
long may that continue. So, for example, yesterday we did the Ribble Valley, and we went to a Moreland school, private school in the Ribble Valley, where there was a huge Christmas market. That was assembled by a lovely lady called Kimmy Watson, who is the leader for the Ribble Valley Mums in Business.
Mm-hmm.
And she invited me along with the school, which is roughly about 3.5 hours away from where I live. And I had to go. So once we arrived, I walked around dressed as Mrs. Claus with my long velvet dress and my little coat that goes over the top of the gold swells.
Wow.
and my hair all up with pins and sparkly bits, and it was just wonderful. It was adorable. And the children just literally walk up to me and it's like, "Hi, Mrs. Claus." And there was one boy who wasn't even 2 years old yet who saw me, and as soon as I said, "Hello, how are you?" he jumped off his little stool, took me by the hand, which had a lump in my throat at this point.
I bet.
And his mum was aghast, like, "Oh my goodness." And we walked around, and he just had a mission in his hand for Mrs. Claus to buy him cake. He led me straight to the cake stall and I bought him a big piece of cake.
Come on. Now
his mum's supervision, I was like, "Is he allowed cake?" Which one can he have? Because I thought, oh my goodness, if he's diabetic, if there's something this child's not allowed. So he got straight into Mrs. Claus's heart, or the storyteller's heart, and he walked away with a lovely piece of cake, sat and ate it, and then about an hour or so later his papa had come along at this point and brought him in to read the story, and he was just my little buddy. From then on in, he was just, as soon as he saw it was me again, and it was, I think he would after more cake, but there's no more cake now. But he was just adorable, and this is the type of thing that happens. And when I read the story to them, they've sat there quite unsure at first, as they are when they even see Santa Claus, this that, oh my goodness, these are important people, when really we're just lovely people that love children. And within minutes of me starting the story, and they're calling out, they can see a button and laughing and joking at Santa's antics that's happened to him. They are literally then climbing on my knee, hanging off my shoulder, sitting by my feet, and it's the first one to see the button, and they're dabbing over each other to say, "It's me, I found it."
Oh wow.
And it is just wonderful. And then the because they're so invested in the story, within minutes of it being read, the parents want it, they need it,
Of course,
and straight away it's like, my child is invested in this story, it's a book I love to see my children reading, I'm having this story. And the amount of emails I get in February, March, April, May, June, July of parents saying, "We're still reading it now, we still read it at least once a week." We keep saying, "Shall we try another book, because we're in July?" It's like, no, we want that one and another one. So, it's not just a book for Christmas.
I guess you could say that little boy had his cake and ate it. Cue groan. My penultimate guest was a very special young person. He's a young person that I worked with in Bradford. And often when I work with children and young people, I work with them for a set amount of time and then I don't see them again. But with Elliott Broadfoot, I've been able to watch him grow into a true star, which is the word that we talked about. Elliott is now on stage doing the musical with Stock, Aitken and Waterman. But this little clip, slightly self-indulgent, is about the musical that I wrote for a group of young people that Elliott was part of. and how it helped him in his journey to be the confident person that he is today. I mean, I remember the first time I met you, I think you were on a karaoke machine, Kel
Yes,
Surprise. And there was this lad in the corner with this incredible curly red hair singing on the karaoke machine. And I remember God saying to me, you need to look after this one, look out for this one. And I was privileged enough to be able to, you know, talk to you loads at school. And you were in the musical that I wrote, Star. I have to say, it was people like you that I wrote the musical for. You know, you kind of just see someone and you think, right, they're going to be this character. And Emerge, the youth group that we were in, you were as a young person and me as a youth worker. It was just full of characters, wasn't it? Absolutely full of characters.
Oh my goodness.
And being able to write something around these people that you love and want to see succeed was such a privilege. I mean, it was a challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah,
my goodness.
A big challenge. Wow.
I remember you as the cast having to sit in the audience because we didn't have a backstage.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you did that now in the musical?
Oh my goodness.
Excuse me a minute.
I'm just going to come and sit down. Sorry.
Sit in the front row. Excuse me. Sorry. Oh my gosh. But again, no money. That was hard. No. You know, we got a little bit of funding, but we made it work. And more importantly, it did make you all shine. It did.
Yeah, it was a real. I think I struggle. I get quite emotional when I think about it. Because I think about us in that little working men's club stage, and I think about where everyone involved in that is now.
Yeah.
And where they were and who they thought they would be at that time. And it was a really, really magical experience. I felt very lucky to have you there as a mentor and as a leader and as someone who really believed in the power of creativity and art and how they can, whether that's what you want to follow, but they can catapult people into, their dreams. And the fun I had on that show, the friends I made, the people who are, still in my life because of that and because of what you created for us, is wonderful. I think about it. It's my Roman Empire. I'll say I think about it quite frequently. It's a very, very special memory for me.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we were just saying just before we came on air that I wish that I'd done like a cast recording, and we were saying trying to get everybody together.
Yeah,
I mean, so difficult now because nearly all of you are just doing the most high power, exciting, important things. Wow. Can you imagine if we just hadn't seen all of the things that we'd seen in all of you? And I really thank God for that.
Me too.
I consider it such a privilege to be a podcast host, to talk to all these wonderful people. They truly are inspiring. Season 4 will hopefully be no different. We'll be looking at days that we want to celebrate and explore and words that fit into that, all so that we can raise confidence, inspire creativity, and then go and share that with other people. My final podcast guest was Anne-Marie Alexander. Anne-Marie is an author and has been working hard writing a musical. You'll have to listen to the episode to hear more about that. One of the things that we always do on the Raise podcast is we have a challenge at the end. And the challenge of this episode was to think about ways to create joy. Oh, and also to eat our favourite chocolate bar. Again, you'll have to listen to hear more about that. But Anne-Marie had something very important to say about what happens when you really don't feel like you've got anything to give anyone else. It led then beautifully into the on-the-spot poem that I wrote for her. I hope that this really blesses you as it did me.
The one thing I would say is when I was at my most broken, I didn't think I had anything to give. But when I went out there, I just started encouraging others, even though I felt like I had no encouragement in myself. Mm. And that broke the cycle for me. So I would really encourage people that don't look to what you think you haven't got. Kindness, everyone can give in kindness. Everyone can give out encouragement, no matter how broken you feel personally. And it will, if you do that, form part of your healing.
Mm. And I wonder as well, just as a bit of an extra fun challenge as it's Christmas, go and buy yourself some chocolate. You know what your favourite chocolate bar is. Go and buy yourself some chocolate because you deserve it. You're allowed it. And chocolate is yummy. And if you can't eat chocolate, go and buy yourself another snack that you like. Even better, go and tell someone else to buy you some chocolate. Or buy somebody else some chocolate. Oh, I'm just rambling now. Just chocolate. Just enjoy chocolate. Is there anything else that we haven't said that you want to say before I finish with our little on-the-spot poem?
I genuinely think we've covered joy, and all I would say and stress again is focus on being the source. Focus on the source of your joy and being the source of someone else's. Yeah. And and I just wish everybody a really, really happy, joy-filled Christmas.
That's lovely. Okay, so we come to the bit of the podcast where I write a little poem. So just give me a minute while I have a think. It was dark. It was black and it felt really cold, and I didn't have anybody I could hold, but I saw a glimmer and I saw a drop. So I went to the source and I tried to fill up, and the water started to run, and I knew that the joy had begun, and it ran through my veins and it ran to my soul. It ran through every part and it made me whole. So I grabbed what I could to fill up even more. And I went to my friends and I started to pour. And that joy was released. And that joy was a feast. And we knew on that day it was for us all.
Beautiful.
No chocolate, but water and joy. Well, I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed this trip down memory lane. Season 3 has been so important and I've learned so much. Please listen again to the episodes that you love, share them with your friends, and make sure that you're ready for season 4 coming very soon. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to the Raise podcast. As I said, it's a privilege to be able to talk to these amazing people and share it all with you. Take care.